This Autobomber is a result of a conceptual challenge grounded around the new Bladefall of Trarthus skill. So this skill drains 5% of your mana per second, and this is a skill cost. It interacts with more multipliers to your cost, but it also counts as spending mana for the purpose of Scold's Bridle, which allows you to take physical damage as a percentage of the amount of mana that you're spending up front. This interaction serves as the basis for my current build, my cast when damage taken mana looper. Now most cast when damage taken setups or the like focus on two main things. One is sort of cast when stun using Blood Notch, Mutable, and those recovery mechanics, and the other set tends to be War Loopers using Olroth's Resolve, Trader, Scion, Pathfinder, that sort of thing. This setup though relies almost entirely on recoup mechanics. Now efficiency wise, I don't know that this is the best. I would probably stay with CWS if you want to be as cheap as possible, but it is very interesting and it's a bit more flexible. The build doesn't get completely deleted by Temporal Bubble, it can get fairly decent defensive numbers, and it can opt for Mage Blood, which Warloop can't really do. In terms of recovery, there are two main pieces. One is Recoup, and the other one comes from a rune graph. So the first piece of Recoup comes from the 9 Lives Forbidden Jewel set, exclusive only to which it's, sometimes really expensive, sometimes not that expensive, but it's very, very rare, and it allows you to recoup 25% of your damage taken as life, mana, and ES. Despite this, I basically never have an ES pull because I'm taking so much damage all the time, even with Glorious Vanity Doriani. It is one of the few sources of mana recoup that exists in the game, other than the skill tree, mastery, and a Watcher's Eye, and I don't really opt for the Watcher's Eye in this setup, because there's other ways to get your mana back. But it is really great and generally efficient to have this much recoup from 2 jewel slots. I also opt to get recoup from the top side of the tree and also off of my ring. The second main source of recovery is from the rune graft of recompense. Now this is very different than what most people are doing using this rune. There's a lot of popular things with this, but I'm going to focus specifically on rolling magma because I believe that this skill is different and only similar to Peacock of bouncing. So it says a bunch of things, but for all intents and purposes, what happens when you use rolling magma, when you also have a snake pit on the right ring, is that as soon as a rolling magma projectile ends, it recovers infinite mana. It just recovers you to full no matter what. As long as there's a projectile that's able to finish its travel from rolling magma and you have the ring, it just fully recovers you. It's really crazy. It's a bit awkward to do in corridor maps and stuff like that, but it's just an incredible recovery mechanic that doesn't rely on you spending a lot of mana with that skill. The offensive battery for this character is also basically just cheating as well. There's 3 main things I want to talk about. Firstly, Eye of Winter is an incredible skill. In theory, it's one of the highest, if not the highest effectiveness skill in the game, reaching about 5,000% effectiveness per cast if you're able to hit with every projectile and max travel distance. Now, I used to do this with Arcanist Brand, or I did this with incredible amounts of slower proj. This setup, however, is even more old school, taking me back to 3.16 where I was using Tornado to chain off of. Now, Tornado does have a hit limit, but because I'm casting so many different spells at a time using the loop mechanics, I'm able to use cast and damage taken Tornado and then allow Eye of Winter to also chain off that Tornado to hit single target while also having Errant and other straight projectiles kind of just hitting the boss itself. The second core part of this battery is Pyroclast Mine of Sabotage. This is really broken. I hope they delete this skill at some point, maybe this league even. But basically, I get to throw down some mines, and when I have 18 of them down, it gives me somewhere in the range of 6.5 times, 7 times more damage. Normally, this is a little bit awkward, but I'm an Autobomber. I'm a War Looper, or Mana Looper rather, so I don't need to worry about anything else. There's no other buttons to press. So I throw these mines down, they last about 10 seconds, they can't be damaged because of choice on the tree, and it's just insane for single target. I'm still able to clear fairly well because I do have a level 25 Anger from my Mercenary, and I also use Awaken Added Cold on my main links. The third main part of this battery is Doriani's prototype, or I guess that plus the Admiral. So I can't really convert that fire damage to lightning, but the Admiral chest allows me to use my fire damage and then have enemies take that elemental damage as if they were taking lightning damage. In essence, you're playing other elemental setups, but basically as lightning setups for your Doriani's Merc, which is obviously really OP this patch. Now, despite all these things, it's still a fairly challenging build for me to put together, and it's super far away from optimization right now. It hasn't even hit the first CDR breakpoint, and there's just a number of challenges that I want to dive into as I get into this POV. Firstly is that the maximum mana has to be high enough that you can actually do enough damage to yourself for Scold's Bridle, so you can actually continuously prot that cast of damage taken setup. This is actually really high, especially since I want some degree of mitigation from endurance charges. Secondly, I need enough mixed recovery to not die. This includes not only not dying while the loop is sustaining, which is actually really easy, but starting the loop can be really dicey. Thirdly, socket pressure is insanely high because Bladefall of Trarthus needs to have a really high cost, even with that gigantic mana pool, to actually proc Scolds for CWDT. So socket pressure is really difficult to solve. I'm even playing with an unset. Fourthly, skill selection has seemed very arbitrary, but it's actually very specific, and there's a lot of kind of small problem solving to think about there. And lastly, the defensive options are highly restrictive because of all the uniques, all the different mechanics that are being constrained right now. And you know what? Let's just get into the POV, let's talk about it. So as far as I can tell, the config is actually pretty inaccurate. It should be a slight understatement of what the damage actually is. And I think this should be able to get quite a bit more damage by, investing the CDR in certain places, and also just, optimizing this further. You can see the tree's a little bit of a mess right now, and I actually don't know if there's other things that I would do to change this tree around. I could be pathing towards here and using one of the more cursed jewel combinations, maybe going for a lethal pride, transcendent, all that stuff. But this is where I'm at right now, for now, with this tree. Extremely ugly, kind of akin to like normal mana setups, but I end up pathing over here for various reasons. And I guess I can talk about each of them, but they'll probably be more relevant as I cover gear. The Ascensi though, I am going for Bastion. This doesn't get procced by my loot, and that's really, really important. I don't know that this is true, but I think if you're playing things like Cloak of Defiance, Lightning Coil, this will just like constantly deplete. But because I'm using Shaper of Flames and Calm's Binding as my sources of Elemental or Fizz Shift, it actually doesn't get depleted, and then Scolds gets to do Fizz damage to me. So this is like super, super nice to have this combination of things for this particular setup. Shaper of Storm's really great for this, and then Shaper of Winter has actually been pretty nice as well. I don't really calc for a chill for mitigation, but I've definitely noticed it, especially on anything that's not an Uber Boss. Uber Bosses are, they are what they are. You might take a mastery for it. Otherwise, I'm playing a single cluster setup right now, and let's get into the skill setup first. So, in my 6th link, I run a Bladefall of Trarthus. All of this stuff is purely for mana cost. I don't really care what else this is. I'd be open to see if there's other things here, but second wind is the most important one. It's a 200% multiplier that does work with Bladefall, which is really great. Everything else is either 140s, and then I have a single 130 with ICD, but there's some flexibility here. I might run Awaken Lightning Penetration here instead, and then run the Crit Mastery over here. I think that would probably be efficient. I'll swap into that later. The second main setup is in my body, is a 6 link, and I played two different attack active skill gems. One is Eye of Winter, and I do like to play this in a level 1 CWDT. So generally this is what I'll go for on this, because number one, I don't want to play with the Forbidden Right setup. That's just too much damage I'm taking. And second, so that like helps out with proc rate, right? And the second thing is that I have a lot of sources of flat damage that have nothing to do with the skill gem itself. So things like Anger from my Mercenary, things like this Awaken Out Cold right here, and then obviously Power Class minus Sabotage. All these things mean that it doesn't really matter if my skill gem's level 4 or it's level 20, right? The gain is some, like 10-15%-ish, but it's actually quite negligible. So yeah. The other skill I'm playing with is Spark of Unpredictability. There are two reasons why I'm doing this. And there's a lot of other skills you could go for, but I think that this is probably the best projectile skill to play here. Number one, I'm using Slower Proj here. This means that for a single target, Unpredictability can sometimes get out sparks that are really, really slow, and those will spread outwards from the splitting from Sniper's Mark. And that's really nice because, I think it's pretty close to getting a good number of hits. It's also one of the highest effectiveness skills in the game and has a higher base duration than the other spark skills. And I also play this in Natural Instinct over here for a little bit of extra skill effect duration. So if I'm pushing this to, what is it? I guess it's a 3-second duration right now, and it can hit once every 0.66 seconds. Basically, I should be aiming for a 5 hit, assuming I'm point blank when it starts, or relatively close. So initial projectile, and then yeah, the proc rate, it's under 0.7, so yeah, it should be a 5 proj hitting, as long as you're able to get enough projectiles. Some of the faster stuff can help to hit as well on the way back from ricocheting and stuff, but it's a little bit weird with chain. But yeah, that's why I've chosen this. Ice Spear is also an option of splitting specifically, but I don't love it because I don't play Return Proj, I don't play GMP, stuff like that. The last, or I guess second last CWT setup is over here. This is kind of a mixed setup. This is mostly damage based. It helps out a lot with clear these skills, but the reason I chose these two skills in particular, even though Firestorm isn't a projectile, is that they're very self-sufficient skills. It's not like support gems aren't good for them, but even without support gems, these things function very, very well. They're also duration skills that have a very, very high limit to what you need. So I'm probably overcapping on Cremation, I definitely am, but I'm not sure I'm overcapping that much on Firestorm or Pelting, given that it only lasts like 2 seconds, you can get up to 12 storms out at a time, so I think these two skills are really great. They have persistent damage, which is really good for having just like random leech uptime, stuff like that, and they have a lot of visual clutter, which makes me feel like I'm playing a better build than I'm actually playing. Utility setup CWDT. This is Rolling Magma with GMP and Tornado. So Tornado, I've mentioned already, allows for chaining for Eye of Winter. It's significant for the damage. It also has its own like secondary damage thing that gets scaled off projectiles that hit it. I think that's much less significant for me. Rolling Magma is infinite mana basically, as long as you can wait for the bounces to end. GMP helps that become more consistent because sometimes projectiles will hit a wall or just stop. In my boots, I run a power class level 21 of Sabotage, linked with Empower, and Vol RF. Every level above 30 is not that powerful, but it's not bad, about 5% more damage per level. I wouldn't mind going like plus 4 on boots instead, but I don't know. These cost like 1 divine or something at the time, so I'm happy there. And then RF easily self-sustains, no problem. You can press Vol RF, it's a little bit dicey, you should be careful about that, but RF definitely self-sustains, no problem with like all the recoup and stuff. Clarity is in an unset ring. I'll talk about that in a bit. I really value clarity on this build. And then finally, yeah, Aegis. Okay, the bit. I'm going to start out with the jewels, I think. Because I think this is a bit more foundational to this build. So I've mentioned 9 lives already. This is 25% of all types of recoup already. In the Scion start, I play a mix of a Natural Instinct with Light of Meaning. This is really cool because it allows all these nodes to be affected by the Natural Instinct stuff. This is also very efficient for anything that's like mana-based. Originally, I was playing with a Militant Faith over here. And it's kind of good. But the thing is, if you do this, it does lower your max mana because it prevents these nodes from benefiting from Light of Meaning. So I ended up not doing that after all, and then moving that up here. But this is really cool because I was able to hit 170 Devotion, which meant really high non-damaging ailment effect, and then also res. But that's that. So I do run a Militant Faith over here. Inner Conviction is really great. 50% free damage, basically, you know, for no reason. And then the last circle jewel is a Healthy Mind. This is just a lot more mana. As things move around, it's possible for me to drop this, but right now it's not seeming particularly conceivable. At least for now. If I get to around 6,000 mana though without it, I'll consider it. Storm Shroud gives me LE res cap, or avoidance cap, elemental element avoidance, combined with a avoid shock suffix. And then I play a couple rare jewels, one for CB, one for just being good. And then this Watcher's Eye. This Watcher's Eye is insane. It's super good. Increased max hit because it gives you much better MOM. Just absolutely incredible with how big your mana pool is and how much recovery you have. And then I use an Anger Merc, so this is really good for that. The main reason I use an Anger Merc is because it's a strength-based Merc, and that means that you can play with both Doriani's Prototype and Gravebind. So I can run a rarity setup, massive rarity setup on my Mercenary that's also using Doriani's Prototype. You can also go tri-attribute for this, like the Wanderer or Sangomancer. I don't like that because number 1, their auras are worse for my particular build, and number 2, they're both ranged, I think, so I think their movement is worse. In theory, I can get my Mercenary to do things like proc Brittle Ground, because he's using Molten Strike. It's pretty melee based. I have Explode on one of my weapons. This is sort of the old setup I was playing on my previous character because I was too lazy to adjust it further. And I also have Countless Binding, which is additive with the stuff that Elementalist does for you. Insane. Defiance of Destiny is mandatory. I would never skip it. Okay, those are the jewels. Let's talk about the gear now. This is kind of the last part of the build. So Nightling Light is fairly self-explanatory. I mean, it's just super good. There was an idea about playing different skills, things like Rolling Magma, Ice Spear, and then playing Mystic Refractor. That did seem like it could have been something, but I decided not to go for that. This ends up being really nice. It also enables carrying staff nodes, so counterweight can be taken off the Anoint. Just pretty good overall. And you know what? Like, it is a little bit annoying, but yeah. Scolds, I have a +1 power charge Scolds, this costs nothing. I mean, I need a Scolds, I might as well just go for an implicit that I want. Reservation could be an option if I want to play 1 extra aura. I can reserve a good amount of mana still, probably down to like 4k without feeling bad about it. Admiral +1 max is going to increase damage, reduce crit, are the good implicits, but pretty self-explanatory, having mentioned already. Glove slot, I want Chaos Res, dual res. Really hard to res cap still. I could help Alira as well and get even more res on other places, but that's here for now. Cold Leech is kind of okay. I just went for it because there aren't great implicits to go for necessarily because I really want Chain, right? And then I have Unnerve, which is like just a clean 10% increased damage taken. It is additive with shock, so it's less good. March +2, these were sick. I mean, I love having extra move speed, so yeah. Strangle Gasp is interesting. So I kind of want to, you know, make this something else, obviously. That'd be ideal. But I do like the Anoint set, so let's talk about them each. Number 1 is Crusader. This is absolutely absurd. Like, look how much increased damage that gives you. Obviously, you know, when you have 355% increased mana on Tree, it's just, you know, I don't know, something like 100% increased damage, plus some max mana. The second one I've already mentioned is Counterweight, just another really high value node because I'm wielding a staff. Number 3 is Adjacent Animosity. So with Eye of Winter, even when I'm playing this setup, there's 2 reasons why you'd want to have slower projectiles. Number 1 is that more projectiles will tend to hit for single target. Number 2 is that it will tend to, the way Eye Winner works, what that line actually says, up to 200% more damage by the time they dissipate, that's not based on like a number based travel time. That's based on how long the Eye Winner still has to travel. So at like, if you had 99% slower proj, pretty much the moment the Eye Winner projectile spawns from the orb, it will hit that 200% dissipation, roughly speaking. So slower proj is also good for that. And then the last one I have is inexorable. This is the same thing as having enduring composure. Again, if I switch on my amulet, which I would like to, like obviously a simplex or a focus amulet would be a lot better for this, but with just Crusader on it. But yeah, this is like the number one reason why I went Strangled Gasp, is to put both this and Crusader on the build. Other ring, Chaos Res, Recoup, Mana Life. I'm very glad to have got this. The Unset Ring enables Clarity, which enables my Watcher's Eye without having to drop anything else, because my sockets are very efficient right now for what the build is. I'm using just a regular Snake Pit. You can go for corruptions. I didn't want them in the end. I have like 3 different corruptions I have right now, like cannot be bled, all res, attributes, and then I think I have a no poison one somewhere. And then I play Mage Blood. I mean, this is a expensive build. I'm gonna pretend it's not. Progenesis is great on this character. So the way Progenesis works with cast damage taken is that it applies kind of like post facto for the purposes of the CWT calc. So it doesn't get in the way, basically, of the damage you're taking. It's also really great when paired with Mage Blood because I path to Flask nodes, which means I can take this 25% chance gain of Flask charge and deal a critical strike. This has a 10 charge per second global cooldown shared across everything. That's okay because I do crit a lot because I'm playing Eye Winner, and I also have a bunch of other skills that can all crit, so that's really cool. There's an idea of also swapping out Sniper's Mark for Assassin's Mark, but I do believe Sniper's Mark helps out with consistency of Eye Winner's chaining clear and chaining single target specifically for bosses. There's some estimations I have regarding simultaneous projectiles and how often they can do hit frequency, but that's that. It also makes Spark of Unpredictability much better for single target because you make more projectiles instead of having them just disappear. So we'll see if that's better than Asmark. But yeah, that's Progenesis. And then my Flask setup is, you know, like I want to move fast, I don't have crit chance. This is paired with Storm Shroud. This is kind of, obviously let's put one reduced Curse Flask, and then I run Ellie Res. I'm also not running a Void Stun on this character. The reason is because I'm pathing to Unwavering, because why not, right? This looks super cursed, but I do think this ends up being efficient. When I think about it this way, 2 travel nodes, or 2 nodes total to open up a Flask suffix, which is the equivalent of about 100% increased critical strike chance, seems more than worth it on this character. So yeah, that's where we're ending up for now. I'm gonna progress this build for at least another day. I want to see if I can hit, or at least which breakpoints for CDR and CWDT I can hit. I can probably at least hit 1 just playing Temporal Chains and stuff like that, but yeah, looking forward to this one. Let me know if you've seen something similar to this or have any ideas about how you'd want to iterate upon this, because I do think the setup has much more potential than I'm letting on. I've been a bit kind of like just struggling on making this because I'm feeling more and more constrained. For some reason, the more currency I get, the less I'm willing to spend it. I got like some Scrooge tendencies. But yeah, see you guys soon.